Good morning, government. Today is Thursday, April 23rd. Kind of losing track of time here. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about overseas representatives of the United States and of every other country. These people are known as ambassadors. And here's from the book. Some 12,000 men and women now represent the United States as members of the Foreign Service, many of them serving abroad. Under international law, every nation has the right of legation, the right to send and receive diplomatic representatives. International law consists of those rules and principles that guide sovereign states in their dealings with one another and in their treatment of foreign nationals, private persons, and groups. Its sources include treaties, decisions of international courts, and custom. Treaties are the most important source today. The right of legation is an ancient practice. Its history can be traced back to the Egyptian civilization of 6,000 years ago. The Second Continental Congress named this nation's first Foreign Service officer in 1778. That year, it chose Benjamin Franklin to be America's minister to France. He served in that capacity for nearly 8 years. An ambassador is the official representative of a sovereign state in the conduct of its foreign affairs. So, United States has lots of ambassadors. By way of example, we have an ambassador to pretty much every other country on the globe. Usually, if a nation doesn't have an ambassador to another country, means that there have been significant problems between those two countries, maybe a war or something like that. But in the absence of huge problems between countries, there are almost always ambassadors exchanged. For some 5 centuries now, most of the formal contacts between sovereign nations, that is, most of their diplomatic relationships, have been conducted through their duly appointed ambassadors. In this country, ambassadors are appointed by the president with Senate consent, and they serve at his pleasure. Today, the United States is represented by an ambassador stationed at the capital of each sovereign nation this nation recognizes. Thus, American embassies are located in more than 180 countries around the world. The United States now maintains over 260 diplomatic and consular offices abroad as well. There, Foreign Service officers promote American interests in a multitude of ways. For example, encouraging trade, gathering intelligence data, advising persons who seek to enter this country, and aiding American citizens who are abroad and in need of legal advice or other help. So if you ever go to another country, say you're backpacking across Europe or something like that, you lose your passport, or heaven forbid you have trouble with the law or something like that, your first contact would be the American ambassador in that country or his or her staff. They would be the ones who would be able to help you as an American citizen be able to deal with whatever issue it is you're having. Some ambassadorships are much desired political plums, and whenever a new president moves into the White House, he typically makes many new appointments. Too often, presidents have appointed people to ambassadorships and other major diplomatic posts as a reward for those individuals' support, financial and otherwise, of the president's election to office. This is talking about people who have no experience with the Foreign Service, have no experience, maybe even in the country that they are being made the ambassador to, but they provided valuable electoral service to a president, so they get made to be the ambassador to maybe some South Pacific island that's very pretty, and they get to go sit on the beach a lot. That's not diplomatic best practice, but it happens a lot. However, in many cases, these ranks are filled with career diplomats in the Foreign Service. One of the things that's kind of emblematic of our time here in the year 2020 is we tend to have a sense in the United States, particularly, of a distrust of experts. We're kind of experiencing this idea where everyone feels like maybe they know better than a doctor or they know better than a scientist. The whole vaccine thing, anti-vaxxers, that's a big part of that. Oh, well, these doctors don't know anything. I think vaccines cause autism, which is BS, by the way. So there's this big sense in the U.S. right now that we don't trust experts, but foreign policy, the execution of foreign policy in other countries, is really something that is best left to experts. President Harry Truman named the first African American, Edward R. Dudley, as an ambassador to Liberia in 1949. Later that same year, President Truman also appointed the first woman, Eugenie Anderson, as our ambassador to Denmark. Those persons whom the president names to certain other top diplomatic posts also carry the rank of ambassador. Examples include the United States representative to the UN and the American member of the North Atlantic Treaty Council. The president also assigns the personal rank of ambassador to those diplomats who take on special assignments abroad, for example, representing the United States in the ongoing efforts to resolve Arab-Israeli differences. A lot of times, President of the United States will send a particular representative abroad, maybe usually someone who's had a lot of experience in foreign policy, to help try to resolve a particular dispute. Back in the second half of the 1990s, President Clinton sent a guy named George Mitchell to Northern Ireland to Northern Ireland has been a hotbed, or had been a hotbed, of anti-British violence and protests for a very long time. The Irish have been trying to throw the English out of Ireland for generations now. And through the 70s and 80s and 90s, really since the late 60s, there had been what the Irish called the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and there were a lot of bombings, a lot of politically motivated assassinations, a lot of innocent bystanders were being killed between the Irish Republican Army, in the fights between the Irish Republican Army and the British Army, basically. And so George Mitchell had been an American senator for a long time, and he had a great deal of experience with foreign policy. So President Clinton sent him to Northern Ireland to broker a peace agreement, which is still in place. They're still called the Good Friday Agreements. I think this was in 1998 that they signed these. They signed them on the Friday before Easter that year, so they call them the Good Friday Agreements. And that has really kept the peace in Northern Ireland for, over 20 years now, which is pretty amazing given all the bloodshed that had been going on before that. But that was an instance in which Senator Mitchell was given the title of ambassador in order to go over there to Northern Ireland and help make that all happen. Okay, so this is about diplomatic immunity. In international law, every sovereign state is supreme within its own boundaries. All persons or things found within that state's territory are subject to its jurisdiction. As a major exception to that rule, ambassadors are regularly granted diplomatic immunity. They are not subject to the laws of the state to which they are accredited. They cannot be arrested, sued, or taxed. Their official residences, called embassies, cannot be entered or searched without their consent, and all official communications and other properties are protected. All other embassy personnel and their families receive the same immunity. Now, this has led in a lot of times in the past, and probably still ongoing in quite a few places, to embassies being used for spying by the countries whose embassies they are. So if we have, the United States Embassy in Moscow or in, whatever capital city around the world, the authorities in that country can't just come into our embassy and search it without our permission. And so we can, countries can and often do set up spy technology in order to kind of find out what their host country is doing and saying from within those embassies. Is kind of a little outpost from the country whose embassy it is into the host country. A lot of shenanigans go on like that, but it's pretty well known that these things happen. Diplomatic immunity is essential to the ability of every nation to conduct its foreign relations. The practice assumes that diplomats will not abuse their privileged status. If a host government finds a diplomat's conduct unacceptable, that official may be declared persona non grata and expelled from the country. A mistreatment of diplomats is considered a major breach of international law. So, if we find that the representative of X country has repeatedly broken American law, That person can be expelled from the country, sent back home, but that power to expel someone has to be used judiciously and carefully. Otherwise, we would be violating quite a bit of international law if we just start expelling people left and right. Diplomatic immunity is a generally accepted practice. There are exceptions, however. The most serious breach in modern times occurred in Iran in late 1979. Militant followers of the Ayatollah Khomeini seized the American embassy in Tehran on November 4th of that year. 66 Americans were taken hostage and 52 were held for 444 days. The Iranians finally released the hostages moments after Ronald Reagan became president on January 20th, 1981. I remember that quite well. I was in elementary school at the time. That was a huge thing. The hostage crisis in Iran, that was a huge thing. But these Iranian protesters had come in and taken over the American embassy, which is just not done. That's the American embassy is considered a part of America in whatever country you're in. So for people to just storm in, take 50 some odd Americans hostage for more than a year, that was a big deal. Okay, then passports. A passport is a legal document issued by a state that identifies a person as a citizen of that state. It grants that person a right of protection while traveling abroad and the right to return to the homeland. Passports entitle their holders to the privileges accorded to them by international custom and treaties. Few countries will admit persons who do not hold valid passports. The State Department's Office of Passport Services now issues more than 10 million passports to Americans each year. Do not confuse passports with visas. A visa is a permit to enter another state and must be obtained from the country one wishes to enter. Trips to most foreign countries require visas today. Most visas to enter this country are issued at American consulates abroad. All right, guys, that finishes up this part of foreign policy. That's foreign affairs and diplomacy. Next week, we will get into the national security part of it, which has to do with the American military. So that'll be an interesting discussion. Zoom meeting tomorrow. See, this is government class, so that'll be noon, right? I will send out the email later today, and I'm going to go ahead and get this uploaded. Hope everyone's having a good Thursday, and stay safe. Bye-bye.